Now, as I mentioned earlier, there has been another tragic coronavirus death in this country, the youngest by far, a 30-year-old man in Queensland who we are told had pre-existing medical conditions, had been sick for 3 weeks or more and was only diagnosed with COVID-19 after his death. But nationally, again, the rate of infections is very low, just 6 today, as I mentioned earlier as well. So we continue to do exceedingly well. But some of the public, media and political hysteria is over the top, treating every new case as a major news item. You know about the pandemic, you know what's happening in the rest of the world, and you know we are going to continue to get cases and need to deal with them. But yesterday there was all sorts of nonsense from people when a couple of school students were diagnosed in Sydney at separate schools, with people on social media declaring they thought schools were supposed to be safe and all of this sort of stuff. I mean, give us a break. There will be infections. We just have to be sensible, and these are being well handled. In Western Australia, there's been all sorts of incorrect buck passing over a few sailors infected on the Fremantle docks. And check out South Australia today. There is 1 new case. Their first for a while, their first for weeks. And it was a woman who was allowed into the state despite its closed borders. She was allowed in on compassionate grounds. Now, this sort of stuff will happen, but the Labor opposition there sees scandal.
People have been making sacrifices in not seeing people. People haven't been able to go into state without having a quarantine. People haven't been able to visit many aged care facilities to see loved ones. People haven't been able to go to funerals because of the restrictions in place. And yet they see this happen without all of those proper precautions in place. And they're scratching their heads and wondering why that was allowed to happen, particularly when it was a case of somebody arriving from the UK, which is in the top 5 places in the world for COVID-19 cases.
Oh dear, 1 infection, 1 case in South Australia in weeks. The country is rapidly becoming divided between the sensible people and the panic merchants. 1 case, and it's a political issue. I suppose the Liberal Premier of South Australia, Stephen Marshall, though, deserves this because of his silly border ban. That gives the impression he doesn't want to cope with a single case in his state. This all just underscores how we need to get rid of these state border closures, open up our economies and our societies behind our quarantined international borders, and make sure the public, the media and the politicians are committed to handling this disease sensibly and calmly. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Let's follow up on some of those issues with the Queensland Opposition Leader, Deb Frecklington, who joins us now live from Brisbane. Thanks for joining us, Deb. Firstly, do you call on Anastasia Palaszczuk to open up the Queensland borders?
Well, look, yes, I do, Chris, and it's great to be on your show. But of course, first of all, I should say that my thoughts and prayers are with the deceased family, the deceased man from Blackwater, that case that we heard about today. Now, we know that everyone in that town should be doing the right thing, go and get tested. In fact, anyone from any of the surrounding towns or anyone that's visited Blackwater, please go and get tested. We need as many testings to take place. But it is, Chris, look, it is deeply concerning that the Premier's argument for keeping our borders closed, that argument appears to be eroded now, and that's what we've been saying to the Premier. You need to have a bit of common sense, make sure the borders are reopened again. And I'm talking about, Chris, even with the Premier's own plan, using her own Chief Medical Officer, they said the borders could be open in July, and now the Premier is using community transmission argument from New South Wales and Victoria to keep our borders closed for possibly post-September. This, Chris, Queensland cannot and cannot afford to have our borders closed till September.
Well, the infection curve is crushed across the country. The National Chief Medical Officer says there's no medical reason to have borders closed. You've got businesses in Queensland, of course, going bust. Why wouldn't you have taken legal action in the way that Pauline Hanson is taking to actually challenge this in the courts, in the High Court, on behalf of Queensland businesses?
Well, look, Chris, if the matter's already before the High Court, let's get that done. What I want to see is a bit of common sense from our Premier. I want the Premier to listen to the Queensland community, particularly the the businesses that are involved in the tourism industry. Chris, I was down at the Gold Coast yesterday and I can tell you they are hurting. The malls are completely empty. They rely on our domestic tourism. I mean, Cairns in the far north relies on a lot of our international tourists and domestic tourists, but on the Gold Coast, we want to see the borders open so those businesses can restart again. And let's remember, the Prime Minister of this country has said that we all need to get out of from underneath the doona and restart the economy. Well, and I can tell you that people across them.
Well, he has done indeed, and as you say, businesses are suffering, and shouldn't you be taking up the fight on behalf of businesses and people in Queensland? You've got Pauline Hanson has organised for lawyers to send this letter to the Queensland government. It arrived with them yesterday. It's given them till 4 o'clock tomorrow to open up the borders, or there will be this High Court challenge. Shouldn't the LNP in Queensland jump on board this? Pauline Hanson's looking at raising money through a GoFundMe page to try and get this happening. Surely the LNP would have much greater resources and a team of lawyers who are members of the party who might help out.
Well, Chris, what Queensland businesses and people are telling me is that they actually want the Premier to stick by the decisions that she has made based on the health decisions that she has been given and get those borders open. I mean, we've already got Pauline Hanson doing the High Court challenge. Good luck to her on that. I do not think that the people of Queensland can afford to wait to see the outcome of a High Court challenge before the borders are open. It is just impractical. What we need to see is the pressure maintained on the government, and that's exactly what the LNP have been doing right from Cairns all the way down. We've been forcing the government to admit that there may need to be, for example, a bubble from Maryborough North, so a North Queensland bubble to enable people to travel within that bubble. We've also been talking about the fact that we believe that we should be able to travel within the state and more people should be able to attend restaurants, cafes and clubs. But Chris, at the end of the day, we need to see this economy booming again in Queensland, and that won't happen whilst ever Anastasia Palaszczuk's got a head under the doona, definitely under the doona, unfortunately. So we will continue to push her on that and represent the people of Queensland who are really, really hurting. You
say you'll continue to push her, but this can be a constitutional issue. The High Court could be forced to expedite this case and deal with it within weeks rather than have borders closed for another 3 months. This is not a case that's run by Pauline Hanson. She's helping to get it started, but it's going to be run on behalf of Queensland businesses. Why wouldn't you jump on board this High Court challenge to try and force the issue to save livelihoods, to save businesses?
Well, Chris, I've already said I welcome Pauline Hanson having the High Court challenge.
I'm saying don't just welcome it. Sorry to interrupt again, though, Deb Frecklington. The point is, don't just welcome it.
Chris,
don't stand back up on the sidelines. Why not get on board and try and push the issue? Because, Chris, what I'm using our resources to do is actually work each and every day to force the issue through the means that we have. We've already got one High Court challenge. We know that that's... Yeah, but what difference is it going to make, Chris, if I jump on board Pauline Hanson's? It's already in the High Court, or it actually isn't. Tomorrow afternoon, I think, is the deadline. If you jumped on board, it would give it additional political weight, considerable additional political weight in the public debate. But certainly in terms of running the legal case, the LNP would have resources that a GoFundMe page won't be able to pull together.
Well, Chris, that's out of my hands. The organisation, that would be certainly up to them if they wanted to put any of those resources in. But I would say to you, Chris, is that there is other ways and means about getting a message across. And have I said, yes, that's fine for One Nation to be running a High Court challenge? Many people from the sidelines have said that they want to jump on board that. What I say is that the people of Queensland cannot afford to wait for the outcome of a High Court challenge. So if every political leader in Queensland is got their head, stuck in what's happening in the High Court, I think then we're letting down the people of Queensland.
All right, thanks for joining us again, Deb.
Thanks, Chris.
Deb Frecklington there, the opposition leader in Queensland. She likes what Pauline Hanson is doing. She supports it, but not jumping on board with it, not giving it the impetus of the Queensland opposition.